Hi and welcome back to the channel. This is Rideshare Buddy UK. My name's Kevin and I'm going to have a quick chat today about the big news of Lyft coming to the UK, taking over Freenow. A lot of people, drivers I've spoken to, think that this is going to lead to better pay for drivers. I'm going to say, no it's not. And I'll explain the reason why. Just because there's a new app on the scene doesn't mean the companies are going to be chasing drivers, because quite simply all the drivers are going to do is download the new app. They won't leave anywhere, so Uber aren't going to want short of drivers, veezu aren't going to want short of drivers, Bolt aren't going to want short of drivers. All it means is that a driver, instead of having 3 apps on the phone, will have 4 apps on the phone. So that's no competition at all for drivers, and competition for drivers is what pushes pay up for drivers. And as there's not going to be any competition, there's not going to be any rise in pay. So sort of looking back on this, back in the 1980s when I first did private hire driving, drivers were quite well paid, not too bad at all, and that's because local companies had to compete for drivers. If you had a car and you wanted to do private hire driving, you would generally only work for one local company. You may take some airport work over the phone from another company, but generally on the radio, you had one radio in your car that was connected to one base company. Basically, the company would provide you with a radio. Some of them were quite big in the 80s. You'd have no room for 2 radios, so you couldn't multi-app or multi-radio. You'd have the one in there. Some drivers, real professional drivers, would buy their own radio because there was much better quality sound and you could call on jobs much better because you could hear the job first time. Well, some of the old base radios they used to fit, which came at the cost for the company, didn't really provide you with very good reception. So real good drivers bought their own radios, but even then, when they moved from one company to the next, the company they went to had to go to the expense of changing the crystals and retuning the radio for their frequency. So base companies wanted to keep their drivers, and what would happen is if one base company did a lot of advertising and got lots and lots of customers and they couldn't cover that work, other drivers would soon find out and then migrate to the other company. They'd say, leave your radio back, I'm going to go to this company. What they didn't do was put in 2 or 3 radios and work 2 or 3 radios. Couldn't do that. So there was always competition for drivers, and that competition meant you were looked after. My first one, in Birmingham, there really was only 3 major companies, Black and White, Blue Circle, and I think it was Ace or Alpha or something like that, one of the smaller of the ones. Big Black and White as well I worked for. I paid £75 a week for the rent on the car, and I was a night driver, and I paid £35 a week for the radio. And whatever I made. As long as I covered that £35, I was fine. So I think my total weekly was about £110, including the car and the settle, and you could make that on a Saturday night. Now, the base companies were always in competition on the price of their radio to try and attract new drivers. So if a new company set up and people started to leave and the base company wanted to stop people leaving to the new one, they say, we'll give you a month free base rent. Keep the drivers happy. And that's what used to happen because there was competition for drivers. With apps, there's no competition for drivers. The only competition is for the customer. Drivers will pull on as many apps as they can fit on their phone, and they'll work all of those different apps. And that means the company, the Ubers, the Lyfts, the Bolts, the veezus don't have a problem with looking after their drivers, because they know that if Lyft sets up, Uber aren't going to worry about losing drivers. They'll worry about losing passengers, and they may attract them by reducing fares to passengers, which they will then pass on to drivers by saying reduce fares for drivers. But they won't worry about losing drivers because they know the drivers will keep the Uber app on and they'll just upload and switch on Lyft and Tandem or Quadruple or how many apps you have on. So Uber's not going to be worried about attracting drivers. Lyft aren't going to be worried about attracting drivers. Veezu aren't going to be worried about attracting drivers because they know once the app's on the phone, they've got the driver. Full stop. Drivers will not take the apps off the phone. And it's only when drivers start to take the apps off the phone that there then becomes competition for drivers. And that is what will drive standards up. But that won't happen. It won't happen. Lyft will come out, and the moment Lyft comes out, all the drivers will just jump on it and they'll load it up together with Uber and they'll play the system. Uber won't feel any hurt from drivers, and they will start to feel hurt from losing passengers. And then we may get a price war from the passenger side of things between Lyft and Uber to try and see who's going to control the market. And that price war will be passed down to you, the driver. So Lyft coming on the scene is not going to boost your earnings. Lyft coming on the scene could see driver pay plummet even more as the big apps compete to get riders. And they'll pass those losses on to you, the driver. So sorry, I don't see Lyft taking over Freenow as being a salvation for rideshare drivers. It could in fact be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of them. Oh well, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'd like your thoughts. Do you think another app coming on the scene is going to produce competition for drivers? Or do you think, just like me, all that's going to happen is that drivers will load up Lyft and run it alongside Uber? No competition for drivers, but lots of competition for riders, which will drive down prices.